The Japan Chronicle was an English-language newspaper. It was published in Kobe, in Japan, starting in 1891. Its first title was the Kobe Chronicle. In 1900, it changed its title to the Japan Chronicle. In 1902, it started a weekly edition. Brill has now brought you the Japan Chronicle Online in its primary sources archive. What Brill has done by bringing you the Japan Chronicle is it has opened a window into East Asia, which is not dependent on your command of the Japanese language, because the Japan Chronicle was an English language newspaper. The Japan Chronicle brings you everything that a newspaper should bring you. It brings you gossip, it brings you opinion, it's bitchy, it's opinionated, it's biased, it's prejudiced, it's sensational. It produces polemical articles, it produces difficult to read articles, it produces easy news, it has gossip, it has just about everything that you would value in a newspaper. But here you are with this newspaper. With this newspaper you can look straight into the daily life of East Asia, the daily life of Japan, from about 1902 until the last issue, more or less the last issue, in 1940. So what you have is this window that you can use to synthesize the history of Japan, the development of Japan, the intellectual development, the economic development of Japan through the commercial supplement. And you can use it as a source in any way that you want. Who was the Japan Chronicle produced for? Primarily the expatriate newspaper buying community in Kobe. Tokyo was 8 hours away. Yokohama, another community, another foreign community, was a few hours away. There were also communities in Hakodate, and of course there were expatriate communities throughout East Asia, in China and in Korea. All of these people read the Japan Chronicle by some way or another. Often journalists from other newspapers in China and in Korea would be working on the Japan Chronicle. These were networks, and there were networks of newspapers, and the Japan Chronicle led a particular type of network. It was not a patriotic newspaper. It refused to beat the drum for Britain during the First World War. The editor lost. The founding editor, Robert Young, who was a radical, an old-fashioned radical, bemoaned the war, although one of his sons was killed in the war. He didn't stop his children going to the war, but he bemoaned the war. Japanese intellectuals read the Japan Chronicle, and many of their number published articles in the Japan Chronicle in English translation that were not available elsewhere. The Japan Chronicle was subject to less censorship in its earlier years than Japanese newspapers, just simply because of the language problem. It could get away with articles where its readers would read between the lines. It had a Japanese readership, as increasingly a command of English became necessary, de rigueur, or fashionable among Japanese intellectuals. It was left-leaning. It applauded the revolution in Russia in 1917, but it did not necessarily support the communists in China later on, partly because it changed editors. Its founding editor, Robert Young, was a very opinionated, very strong-minded Briton of Scots origin, who was very feisty, a beautiful writer, extremely witty, very funny. How the business community in Kobe put up with the editor's points of view has always remained rather a mystery to me, as the managers of the Dunlop Rubber Company and other companies just simply swallowed this very strong, near-communistic newspaper that was in their midst, but they had no choice. The nearest rival was the Japan Times, and it would take 8 hours for the Japan Times to reach Kobe, so they really had very little choice. The commercial supplement of the Japan Chronicle, which comes with this Brill online edition, is an immaculate record of Japan's economic development, with immaculately recorded statistics of trade, sales, shipping prices, shipping movements, and so on, movements in currency, and so on. Many of Japan's major political scandals were commercially based, so that it has a sort of crossover with political developments. Newspapers have traditionally been treated as secondary sources, but we believe that the Japan Chronicle and newspapers like it are primary sources. Why? Because they are raw. They give you raw information. It is edited, it is printed, but it is still of its day and of its time. Japan Chronicle was continually contradicting itself, going back on its word, arguing with other newspapers. It was an organ of opinion. It's very important that the Japan Chronicle is an English language newspaper from the point of view of people who would want to read it. Because being an English language newspaper, first of all, it offers the reader access without having to read Japanese, into Japanese history, into Japanese events, Chinese events, East Asian events, and later on into events in Southeast Asia. Offers that. Secondly, the Japan Chronicle was important, the Englishness of the Japan Chronicle, the fact that it's an Anglophone publication, meant that it was extremely influential on journalists in Japan. Most journalists who went to Japan could not read or speak Japanese. Therefore, they did not have access to the man in the street. Therefore, they were more influenced by English language publications. And they had to choose. They would choose between the official English language publications, for example, the Japan Times, which is still going today, which was backed by the Japanese Foreign Ministry, and independent, feisty organs like the Japan Chronicle, which were more opinionated, saucier, gossip, more full of gossip, and so on. And these journalists would take a lot of their opinions from the Japan Chronicle. Therefore, they would take their opinions and then they would send them back to Western newspapers. And this had a fundamental effect on the image of Japan. And this went on for many years. When people are reading the Chronicle and other newspapers, in the 1930s especially, they're looking for signs of the rise of nationalism in Japan. They're looking for signs of how on earth Japan got to the situation where it was taking on all the great powers in its war against China and in its war on the European colonies in Asia. The Japan Chronicle is full of accounts of meetings that were broken up by bullies, by right-wing thugs, of fights, of imprisonments, of all sorts of things. You can follow a great deal just simply by reading this. The minutiae of the rise of Japan, of Japan's agenda for predominance in East Asia is there. At the same time, you can also see the loss of power and the shifting of power to America, to the United States, with the Washington Agreement of 1922, by which Japan and Britain and their alliance was ended. So you can see an increasing focus on hostilities between Japan and the United States. If you're looking for these kinds of details, if you're looking for clues as to why and how war breaks out, which is the most terrible thing that can happen between nations, if you're looking for these details as a scholar, as a student, as an interested person, you have this English language source that will take you through and that will show you that wars do not break out just like that. They are slow accumulations of thousands of thousands of thousands of different little details. The decision to go to war is taken by very few people, but the decision to make war possible and the formation of a warlike opinion in people's minds takes years to develop. It's hard work in a way. It's never a deliberate decision. If you read the pages of a newspaper like the Japan Chronicle, you will see this. You will see countless incidents of prejudice on both sides. You'll see incidents where people were ready to rush into something much more serious. The Japan Chronicle probably contains some of the best essays, contemporary essays, on contemporary opinion, politics, society, developments in society, developments in East Asia, available anywhere. It's a considerable achievement that Brill has managed to get the Japan Chronicle online, and I would urge you to read it.